So, does somebody want to start reading at 8 and just kind of keep going?
I'll go.
Okay.
When Jesus had come down from the mountain, great crowds followed him, and there was a leper who came to him and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, if you choose, you can make me clean." He stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, "I do choose, be made clean." Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them." When he entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, appealing to him, and saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed in terrible distress." And he came to him, and he said to him, "I will come and cure him." The centurion answered, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only speak the word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and the slave does it." When Jesus heard him, he was amazed and said to those who followed him, "Truly I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and will eat with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. Well, the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown in the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And to the centurion Jesus said, "Go, let it be done for you according to your faith." And the servant was healed in that hour. When Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and began to serve him. That evening they brought to him many who were possessed with demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word, and cured all who were sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took our infirmities and bore our diseases. Now when Jesus saw great crowds around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. A scribe then approached and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Another of his disciples said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus said to him, "Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead." And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A windstorm arose in the sea, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him up, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, you have little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds of the sea, and there was a dead calm. They were amazed, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" When he came to the other side, the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demoniacs coming out of the tombs met him. They were so fierce that no one could pass that way. Suddenly they shouted, "What have you to do with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now a large herd of swine was feeding at some distance from him. The demons begged him, "If you cast us out, send us into the herd of swine." And he said to them, "Go." So they came out, entered the swine, and suddenly the whole herd rushed down to the steep bank into the sea and perished in the water. The swineherds ran off and on, going into the town, and they told the whole story about what had happened to the demoniacs. Then the whole town came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they begged him to leave the neighborhood. And after getting into a boat, he crossed the sea and came into his own town.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Anything jump out at you, or any connections you're seeing between these stories and other things?
One thing just jumped out at me that had never occurred to me before. Jesus finds a lot of convenient boats that he can just jump into and go across the lake. Do they just leave these boats for anyone to travel, or do they rent a boat? Maybe they rented the boats, or
No idea.
It's the Ubers of Galilee.
I guess.
Yeah. Boats were free for all.
Is this the Sea of Galilee?
I mean,
What sea
maybe
is
they
this?
He was on the other side. Came to the other side. They just crossed the lake.
Oh, I see. I'm not
None of
sure.
these seas are even that big, right? I mean, they call them
No,
seas, but they're not
they're
even
lakes.
big. So
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time picturing this tall cliff that would go down into a little lake. I don't know.
Well,
Well,
some lakes are pretty big.
yeah, and they do have some seas over there too, but
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm just looking at how big it is.
Yeah, Sea of Galilee.
Okay, I'm going to throw this in you. That one phrase,
Oh, Sea of Galilee.
I can't even remember what I read it, but verse 22, Jesus said to follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. I
Yeah.
remember when I learned, the years. What is your read on this?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point because he does refer to Herod as a fox in another point.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting connection. These two examples, it feels like perfectly reasonable things that people say, and Jesus seems to respond harshly, which has confused people, and so that's made them pause. Like, if someone has died in your family, to go through the burial ritual, and then, someone says, I want to follow you, and he's like, do you really? It just seems kind of rude, but I think part of it is that Jesus is trying to not be flattered, but to also impress upon people that this is a complete departure from the life they've known. And it doesn't mean you don't love and care for your family, but the note that I have is on family duty, that can be a huge all-consuming thing. To bury, who was it, his father?
Yeah.
That wasn't one day, that would be like a week of preparation and family coming over. So he was basically saying, Jesus, hang out here for a week, because I have this important thing to do. And I think Jesus was like, you're with me, you're coming with me to do what I'm doing or not. And Matthew tends to be just kind of stark and harsh that way. I think there's a real feeling of, you don't have to do this. That's kind of my understanding is, it's not going to be easy, you don't have to do this. There'll always be something to say, okay, well then let me just do this, let me just do this.
Related to burying the father, I was also thinking that what would be that man's obligation to his mother and family.
Yes, struck me too. You're not just burying your dad.
Yeah. I've heard the tensions over the years too about, yes, it does need to be on your family. But then that goes into the cults.
Yeah.
They have you do up your families, that, cut your ties. We know the way. This is it, etc. And, taking these to the extreme.
Yeah, and yet at the same time, they go to Peter's house with his mother-in-law. And Jesus is asked, oh, your mother and your sisters and brothers are here. And he goes, who are my mother? Who are my sisters? So people see that as renouncing family. But then in Acts, we see that his mother is one of the disciples praying with the others after Jesus has risen. So it's not a literal never see your family again. It is, what is your heart and intention? And if you are, especially I think when these were being written down, there was so much family tension, and maybe even more so than what we have in America, because we're so individualistic. That sense of what is your obligation to your family, to your tribe, to your people, to your home, is just so much more than maybe what we understand it today. And you could really feel that you're rejecting your family by doing something very, very different. I'm not getting it out very well, but again, if we take these too literally and get cultish about it, that gets very creepy.
And so on. But see, I'm also aware from going way back when working with immigrant families, especially in Asia, and the respect and so on you're supposed to have in family, by their cultural expectation, and they come to America, and by the second generation, that's all flaking apart.
Yeah,
And the parents, the grandparents are angry, upset,
yeah,
and et cetera.
yeah.
Some of this still goes on today, not in a cultish way, but in a popular culture way. I think because the kids grow up and they get caught up in the American culture, whatever it is, the American way, or something else that's different. But that's what I'm getting at. different than what they're coming from, so they get upset. And have to go through that orifice, whatever it might be, metamorphosis or something.
You're actually raising a really, really good point that is maybe something we hadn't thought about in previous generations. The danger of cultish religion. Did I share with you that a few weeks ago I listened to a podcast about a woman who'd been involved, got herself sucked into a cult? It wasn't a religious cult, it was kind of more new agey, more self-improvement. You know, as she described it, I thought, I'd find that interesting.
Yeah, you didn't mention that.
Yeah. And the woman who they interviewed who'd had this experience has a podcast called A Little Bit Cultish. And she's calling out the vast behaviors that we've accepted as normal from all sorts of institutions, including the church proper, like the larger church, in the way of telling you this is what you have to believe, this is what you have to think. If people disagree with you, they're the bad ones, they're the evil ones, right? That you actually can have, to varying degrees, some of the unhealthy, we're the only ones that can tell you. Stop listening to your own gut, stop listening to your own heart, your own intuition, stop listening to your family and friends. We have the truth. We're the ones who are going to tell you what's right. Mm-hmm. That's deeply disturbing and controlling. And yet, because we baptize it in Jesus, we ignore those behaviors, right? So actually, this is a really, really interesting point, is that when we talk about following Jesus, what does he mean in a way that isn't cultish? Because if Jesus starts sounding like a cult leader, we better run. We should, even if he's Jesus, or we have him wrong. So what does he mean when he says you have to kind of give up everything and follow and be willing to die? And
do you think your family can be a cult?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was in the book Educated, which is a memoir of a true story. Her family was cultish, and she...
Sure. Or just the way it's even a family that we wouldn't even think of, the way they're set up, and that the dynamics of it. The house can be cultish without being in a cult.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I'll tell you what's right. I'll tell you the truth.
Family is everything.
Family's everything. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if we got the wrong end of the stick for a long time on this. So often interpreting this as you're supposed to give up your family and put Jesus first. But so often, especially in Matthew, there'll be two lessons paired together.
Yes.
And you have to interpret them as being reinforcing each other. He's not telling him you've got to give your family. He's trying to discourage them from following him. He's in the way that they're trying to. Maybe that's what he's trying to do.
Interesting.
He's telling them, they're trying to blindly follow him. These are these two guys who are huge super fans, maybe. Who are going, I'll follow you to the ends of the earth. I'll go everywhere with you. And you think he's going back up. You're getting creepy.
Could be, yeah.
Something that I
Turn
think.
this into, you
go
guys have to enter convents and abandon everybody around you and monasteries, because that's really, this verse has been used as the basis of the whole monastery system throughout the Middle Ages to the present day, where all these people would literally divorce themselves from their entire families and never see them again.
I think it kind of one of these things that's kind of interesting is when Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, in one of Israel, I have not found such faith." I mean, that was such an amazing story of such faith. I mean, who would even think that a person didn't have to go somewhere to do something?
Yeah.
I mean, that's out, way out of the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a story of faith.
To me, it's the perfect echo of not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of God. Here's a centurion who doesn't fit the description of someone who'd be faithful, who's showing more faith than Jesus has seen in most other people, and he's just exhibit A, you get it.
That Jesus is amazed.
Amazed.
And
Yeah.
so we think of, well, God, he would see that's coming, he'd know all this. But as being a human being, maybe that's all blocked out, everything's new experience in that, in his humanity part of it. And Jesus is going, wow, that's far out, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
He did none of the things, he just had faith.
Huh?
He did none of the things, he just had faith.
Yeah.
I just
Let's-
want to quickly
yep.
answer the earlier question. So the lake that they had crossed was indeed the Sea of Galilee. And I remember Pastor Scott talking about this too, about how the Sea of Galilee can have sudden storms that flare up
Yes.
with tremendous winds and waves.
Yeah.
The region that they were going into, they were talking about Gardenas. I tried looking that up, and all I got is garden maps. But the note says it's also referred to as the Gargenses, and that I found a map for, and that region is on the southeast side of the Sea of Galilee, which is on the opposite side of Galilee itself. So that's the region that where the demons were cast out after the lake trip.
Okay.
Someone want to read 9? Try to get through 9 here.
I would be able to, but I just realized I need stronger glasses. How about that?
Well, I can go then. So it's funny how they put 9 at the tail end of 8 there.
That is weird.
Anyway, I'll start there at 9:1. And after getting into a boat, he crossed the sea. That's what you did, right? Okay, 9:2. And just then, some people were carrying a paralyzed man lying on a bed. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Take heart, son, your sins are forgiven." Then some of the scribes said to themselves, "This man is blaspheming." But Jesus, perceiving their thoughts, said, "Why do you think evil in your hearts? For which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Stand up and walk'? But so you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." He said then to the paralytic, "Stand up, take your bed, and go to your home." And he stood up and went to his home. When the crowd saw it, they were filled with awe, and they glorified God, who had given such authority to human beings. As Jesus was walking, so the call of Matthew, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard this, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick." But when he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick." Go then and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners. Sorry, the way that sentence ended abruptly.
That is a
I was
tough
thinking
one.
I jumped a line.
No kidding, I don't blame
Nope,
you.
it's a weird one.
The question of fasting. Then the disciples of John came to him, saying, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "The wedding guests cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? And the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth in an old cloak, for the patch pulls away from the cloth, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins, otherwise the skins burst and the wine is spilled. and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is poured into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved. A girl restored to life and a woman healed. Verse 18. While he was saying these things to them, suddenly a leader of the synagogue came in and knelt before him, saying, "My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live." And Jesus got up and followed him with his disciples. Then suddenly a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. For she said to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be made well." Jesus turned and seeing her faith said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well." And instantly the woman was made well. When Jesus came to the leader's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, "Go away, for the girl is not dead, but weeping." And they laughed at him. But when the crowd had been put aside, he went in and took her by the hand and said, "Girl, get up." By the hand, and the girl got up. And the report of this spread throughout that district. Jesus heals the 2 blind men in verse 27. As Jesus went from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying loudly, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he entered the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" They said to him, "Yes, Lord." Then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." And their eyes were opened. Then Jesus sternly ordered them, "See that no one knows of this." But they went away and spread the news about him throughout the district. Jesus heals one who was mute. 32. After they had gone away, a demoniac who was mute was brought to him. And when the demon had been cast out, the one who had been mute spoke, and the crowds were amazed and said, "Never has anything like this been seen in Israel." But the Pharisees said, "By the ruler of the demons, he casts out the demons." And the harvest is great and the laborers few in verse 35. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and curing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into the harvest."
Okay. So Jesus kind of starts his ministry, gives the three chapters of the Sermon on the Mount, and now it's like healing, 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 with a little bit of interactions with people. Just a lot of action now after chapters of knowledge and teaching.
Miracles all over the place.
Miracles all over the place, yeah.
Acts of faith,
Yeah.
lots of faith.
It's interesting, I heard you thump it, I don't know if you were reacting to the verse at the time, but when the Pharisees tried to cast all these miracles into a bad light by saying, by the ruler of the demons, he casts out the demons, trying to say that Jesus is casting out the demons because he himself is one of on the demon side, commanding the demons as the ruler of the demons.
Yeah.
Get that spin.
Yes.
Yeah. It's an interesting point in how we can, as religious people, completely misunderstand something. It feels we're used to A, we're seeing B, so we don't understand it. It's not fitting into our box, so we're going to cast it as evil, literally evil, rather than as something new God might be doing. And the passage that fascinates me is you can't put a new patch on an old cloak or new wine into old wineskins. And that really is fascinating me right now, because it's such there's so much, for example, in the church, an awareness of our growing and opening into awareness. And yet there's a lot of people who most of their life it's been this one way. And can we put new wines into old wineskins, or will the old wineskins burst? You know, it's, can we as communities embrace the new thing God is doing, or do we have to die out for a new community to arise?
That's interesting. Or you could take it back to where, for the one time, as it's written in those little things below, it had to do with the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Yes, although the New Testament was hundreds of years.
No,
from
but,
being written.
oh, excuse me, from the Old Testament to Jesus.
Okay,
Okay, excuse me.
okay, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe one time, that thing you read down below does fit,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. No, I think that in every age, there's the old cloak and the old wineskins and new wine that God is doing. Jesus represents that, but the Holy Spirit is always coming and giving new wine, new life. Wine is a metaphor for spirit and life and joy. And that's always a question, is can we continue to grow and hold and expand the new thing that God is doing? Yeah.
I think to your point, you make a good point there. I was reading that bit about the Pharisees casting all these actions into a bad light, saying that he's just calling out the demons on behalf of the leader of the demons. Isn't necessarily them trying to hold on to their power so much as this being something brand new to them, and thus it doesn't fit in their box, as you said. It doesn't fit in the old ways things have been always done, and so he's doing something brand new that's totally foreign to them, and all they can think of is, it looks like magic to them because they don't understand it, therefore it must be something evil because it's not in our box or our definition of good.
Right.
I want to throw that in the wrong time, but over the years, the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few, pray the Lord of harvest, and laborers out in the vineyard. I've heard that used so many ways in the name of evangelism over the years.
Yeah.
And to the point where I'm confused. So even as I read it now, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I thought I labored for so many years in a certain position, etc., or whatever. And what does it mean? I don't know. Really, what does it mean? The laborers, the harvest is plentiful. It sounds like all these people are waiting. All language, all these people are waiting to be saved. If we just go out and save, if we just got and saved it,
Yeah.
that's the impression I remember when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Anybody remember, maybe in this tradition didn't sing it. One of the songs we used to sing when I was a kid, a hymn in church rather, was in the old red hymnal. We have a story to tell to the nations and turn their hearts to the right. Anybody remember that?
I remember you singing it. Yeah. I remember you singing it.
Yeah,
That's how I know it.
So that's the late 50s, early 60s, etc.
Yep.
And even now, though, I'm still confused by that. So it's like, what are we doing here? And, maybe it has something to do with the old church, new church, the kind of stuff we're talking about. But still, it's what we're doing here. It still confuses me. What am I supposed to do about the harvest? What is that supposed to mean?
Yeah.
You can ask us to worry about it. God's doing the harvest.
Yeah, but there again, I think the passage, it says, the harvest is plentiful, it's happening, but the laborers are few. Pray to send laborers into the harvest, the Lord the laborers.
Or the laborers and what is the harvest? I think we're rather confused
Yeah.
about what is the harvest.
I think we're supposed to be laborers with the harvest, but what is it? What does it mean? What does it do?
That's a good question.
That's for sure.
We won't understand everything. We're not God.
God, trust God that really is.
Yeah, just what you said.
I do think it is helpful for us to bring up how these certain passages have been interpreted in ways that have been harmful or and not good, because we may not necessarily know exactly what Jesus meant exactly, but we can acknowledge that Jesus' words were never intended to harm communities and harm people. And
Good point.
perspectives of evangelism, of we have the right story and they don't, we see how damaging this has been. And just yesterday, I'll kind of close with this because we're getting close to time here. Yesterday I was at the toolkit that we go through the Synod, and there was a really good class I attended on land acknowledgement for Indigenous people and framing that, and she said that way back in her generation, she's been Christian for forever, and she said that the story she heard from her family was that they were already tuned in to God before these white missionaries came. When the white missionaries began to speak of who Jesus was, they instantly recognized him as being someone they understood. So it was easy for them to be Christian. The hardest part was that the behavior of the white missionaries and the other colonialists were so in contrary to what they heard of Jesus, forcing them to become white, right? Talk white, act white, look white, lose your language, lose your tradition, cut your hair off. Your old traditions are bad and evil. Those missionaries thought that they were laborers in the kingdom, and they did horrific things to people. So yes, we have to name that. We have to name that we have interpreted our evangelical command in ways that have been deeply harmful. And so learning from that and going, okay, let's not do that. So then what do we do? That's the answer.
We can
That's the
beat up
question.
the transgenders.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's find a new enemy to force them.
Yeah,
to-
sure, and it'll be interesting. It's interesting to follow where the next
Yeah,
trend is in God's work
right. Who's the new enemy that we have to force to behave like us?
to make ourselves
Yeah.
feel better.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. We took this call too far. Not to we lost the message for the original message for this rallying cry of the harvest, so to speak. And you look at what Jesus was teaching. He wasn't telling people go to the synagogues. He wasn't telling people to. Okay, in one of these passages, he did say to do. One of the offerings after healing someone, but he didn't say the whole point is the church. The whole point is the organization of Judaism. He didn't say you had to believe this way. The whole point of what Jesus has been doing through most of his teachings has been helping people and to reach out and see each other as brethren and love your neighbor as yourself.
Forgiving, understanding.
And who is my neighbor? Everyone.
Yeah. Well, and
Right, Jake.
as we just saw, Jesus saw faith in the centurion who he didn't think to have faith. There we go. If we truly get it, if we truly get what Jesus has been trying to do and teach us, we would walk into other countries and see their faith, recognize it as faith, and know they don't need to be changed.
Yeah.
We would acknowledge and say, you are my brother, you are my sister. We are on the same team. We may have different language, different customs, different names for our God, but we are worshiping the same God. Wouldn't that be a world?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We are all on the same team. If we all could just recognize that we're all in this together and that working together we can be so much stronger than if we keep pulling at each other for what our little trivial differences are.
God has put, every one of us has different skills so this earth can survive. Okay, so who doesn't say that we shouldn't have certain ways of seeing God so this world can survive?
Yeah,
I hear that.
You know?
yeah, absolutely.